Okay.
I just started recording, so now be careful what you say. So, how's everything going for everybody?
Good, going good. Can you hear
I've got
me?
about, if we go around and share, I've got about 4 little stories I want to share.
In
from
2
this
minutes,
last
right,
week.
George?
No, in 4 minutes.
In 4 minutes.
Well,
Okay, well,
I
time
can
me.
try. I can try
Shut
2
up.
minutes. Yeah, let me just let me try to do it in 2 minutes. Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay,
2 minutes.
Yeah.
You got. Slow getting on board this morning. Zoom wanted to update and re-update and update once more.
yeah, it does that.
But I'm here. Hello,
But
everybody.
you're here, so
Hello.
God bless you.
Steve.
And I interrupted George, who was about to do a 2-minute venture.
No,
Okay.
he said 4 minutes.
Words
4
in his
minutes.
mouth now.
All right,
Well,
3 minutes.
Okay, George, what's
Sound like
happening
it's-
in your life?
a true mediator. Well, I'll just say what the things are. Earlier this morning, I was cat sitting for a neighbor. At 5:30, an Uber pulled up in front of the house, and my wife got in, plus Teddy and Rosemary. Rosemary's my stepdaughter, who's about 50 something. She's a nurse practitioner, and her son Teddy, who's 22. So the three of them got an Uber and went to SFO, and they're in the air now going to Montreal for a wedding on Sunday of Kathleen's nephew.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, I'm not there because I'm dog sitting Moby. And we haven't trained anybody yet who could be with Moby without him freaking out, I'm kind of like who's that guy in Peanuts that had a blanket all the time?
Linus.
That's
Yeah.
Linus, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like Moby's blanket. I'm kind of his security blanket. So, anyway, so they're off to Montreal. Adam is the groom. He's the nephew. He's Kathleen's brother's only son, who didn't expect to have a son, but later in life show her upper, and he's really into music. So he does what do you call it? Medieval. He plays the sackbut. Anybody know what the sackbut is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
And he's a member of a group called the Forgotten Clefs
right.
and
right.
other types of
Interesting.
So
You know, George, it might be of interest to the group to know about Moby's background. Not too many of us have spent time at San Quentin. And
yeah, Moby has.
Moby spent time in the big house.
He did.
Tell us a little bit, because I think that service that you and your wife
Okay.
provide is as a dog lover and caregiver myself, that's really amazing what you do.
Will you give me an additional minute to do this?
I
Still,
vote
we have
yes.
2 hours. Don't stretch it
up.
too far.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
how
got.
you're doing when you tack it on.
Yeah, I think I've accrued a little time, right, of being able to speak here.
You got time credits. Go.
Okay, so Moby, it was Christmas Eve of 2019, just before COVID, which started, and Kathleen volunteers in a group called Pen Pals, run by the Marin Humane Society at San Quentin. Some of you may have seen a documentary of a nun who started a program in a women's prison of bringing dogs in. I think it probably was on 60 Minutes or something. Anyway, this is different prisons have this program. So my wife is a volunteer. She's kind of a senior trainer. And so Christmas Eve, when nobody else would volunteer, she said, "Oh, I'll volunteer." So she goes there and drives up to the gates, goes over the bridge, and goes through security. No, she's out in front, and the van pulls up from Marin Humane Society, and a few little dogs are brought, and one comes out and jumps up on her lap and looks at her, and that was Moby. I'll send you the photo of how he looked. He has amazing eyes. Everybody comments on his eyes, but anyway, the idea is, so then Moby stayed there with Mike, a huge inmate who is an expert on small, tiny dogs, Chihuahuas and other things. For some reason, Mike just has this personality. So Moby stayed with Mike for a week. My wife went back on New Year's Eve and Mike said, oh, little Moby didn't eat much. He just couldn't quite calm down and so forth. Moby was a rescue from Kern County, from a hoarder that had dogs, and some people came and picked them all up and brought him to Marin. And at the Humane Society, he was kind of shut down, and they thought maybe he wasn't adoptable. So they said, well, let's send him to San Quentin. Anyway, that's the story behind Moby. So we adopted Moby, kind of a late in life adoption, which we weren't going to have dogs anymore. We figured we'd be free of and being able to travel, etc. But we did it, and here I am. So that's the story of Moby.
I think that's a lovely opening prayer. Do you know that? God is,
Oh, yes.
God is love, spell dog backwards, and that's what it's all about.
Mhm.
That's a good. And
what
Bob
you-
and I did not plan this. This was
We
the
did
Holy
not,
Spirit.
we did not rehearse this in any way. Though George and I take delightful walks with our respective dogs over to a magnificent little amazing plot of land, about 7 acres in the Berkeley Hills, called Blake Gardens,
Mhm.
which is now operated by several departments at UC Berkeley. And they're just spectacular because of the plants and trees that are located there, but it's open to the public.
Anyway,
Unfortunately
I'll-
for us, it follows university hours.
So I'm going to show you Moby here.
Oh, good. There,
You see him?
quick peek. No, there he is.
Oh,
You see
God.
him?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
So
just
he's-
having a good nap.
Yeah, so he's listening. He's kind of a 15-pound terrier. Anyway, so I could tell more stories about Moby, but I'll move on.
George,
the other
before
stories.
you go on, there's
Okay.
something that you and everybody needs to know about backgrounds.
For only a short time
Right.
at San Quentin, he doesn't appear now to be a recidivist.
No, no, he's going straight.
I think
Moby's going straight.
I think he's good.
Zoom backgrounds do not work well if your face isn't in them.
Oh, is that right?
So,
So that's what happens when
well, that's what happens, yeah.
thank you.
So if you,
I get it, yeah.
so for example, that picture of Moby that you held up, if you had held it up in front of your face, it would,
Oh,
with a little of your face showing, it would probably have shown, but we had difficulty seeing it.
oh, you did, okay.
Try holding it up with you yourself staying in the picture.
Yeah, then I would have to get down next to him on the ground and have it like a selfie, right? Have a selfie of Moby and
That's all right.
myself.
You've already gone beyond your 2 minutes, George.
I know.
We're anxious to hear the rest of it.
Anyway.
Well, you
back
guys
to
are
the
tough.
story. Go ahead.
You guys are
Now that
tough
the
there.
technical stuff is out of the way.
That sounds like the mafia, what they told the guy, pay up, your 2 minutes are up.
Mhm.
Pay up your.
Okay, so anyway, so that's what's happening in Montreal. There's going to be a wedding Sunday, and I wish if you could all remember in your prayers, Adam and Paulina. And Adam is interesting. You know, he's gone to Quito, Ecuador, and played. He and a group of 4 musicians from the United States for some reason go, and Quito, Ecuador, they have a weekend or 10 days or something of music and sacred places. And he and his group have played in the cathedral at Quito and so forth. And a lot of the Baroque music is spiritual based, you know, it's based on religious songs and anthems and so forth. So anyway, so I'll send you a link if any of you want to see what he plays and what Paulina sings. She's been an
Great.
award-winning singer.
Thank you.
So the other thing I did, last week I was visiting the wife of a friend who died, and his name is Roger Ipswich. He was a teacher at Polytechnic High School for his career. He went to Whittier College and USF at the Jesuits for, I don't know in what order he went, but he didn't stay at UCSF, so perhaps he went there first. And he was interested in being a minister. He grew up in a small town called Fillmore. That's not far from where Camarillo is.
Well, that's where Barney Gatlin is.
Is he in Fillmore?
I think it's one of those little towns there, Fillmore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Norm
he
Lippincott was there.
he was pastor there. I think he's retired there now.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of, remember Somas? We
Yeah,
used to go walking Somas
yeah.
and Fillmore and,
We
yeah.
used to send our dog to a kennel there because it could run, kind of thing. When the dog was coming back home, when it came up, started up the grade in Camarillo, because we lived in, Thousand Oaks. The
Yes.
dog would get agitated because once he knew he was close to home, or she knew she was close to home once the van started up the grade. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unforgettable grade, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Going up or down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we go through Thousand Oaks all the time on our
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, so Roger taught a course in history and media. My stepkids, Rosemary and Vincent, took it. One of his assignments was that they should watch commercials and make comments on what they observed and so forth. Anyway, he taught people to be media savvy in the high school years. And he became a good friend in the later years, say 4 or 5 years ago. I went with him to church whenever I would go down with my wife to Pasadena to visit some old friends. On Sunday, he went to the First Congregational Church of Los Angeles, which is a historic church with a wonderful organ and beautiful place. And so I would go with him on Sundays, and he'd say, he was on the board of trustees for a while. They have a school called Pilgrim School, and he was on the board there, and he donated altar hangings. What would you call those things where you put it in front of the pulpit and, green for after Pentecost and red for whatever?
Hangings.
Hangings, yeah,
Hanging,
altar
yeah.
hangings or whatever.
That's a technical liturgical word.
Yeah.
Liturgical hangings.
As distinct
Well, that
from
could be-
another
That's
activity.
what liturgical
Yeah.
hangings. That's when
Also.
you string up the liturgy director.
Yeah. I wonder what it is in Latin.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Anyway, Roger was also into sports. He kind of broadcast football games for his school, and he was a USC fan. He and his wife would travel to where USC played throughout the United States. When I was down there visiting just this last week, had an opportunity of going into his room because he has 9 pictures of beagles on the wall. He and his wife adopted beagles, one after the other. And he also had a map of the United States with little pins that he picked up at stadiums, with the kind of the logo of the team, wherever. So he was quite a guy. He started something called Superfan, where about 30 or 40 people signed up, and he would send out a weekly sheet where you circled who you thought would win the ball game, both college and then the winner would get, the top 10 would get prizes. My wife actually won the Superfan one year and he had these little flea sculptures that he picked up in Monterey for the winner. So anyway, Roger was a great guy. And about 10 days ago, his wife couldn't stand it anymore and talked to the hospice people and said, I'm going crazy. I'm not getting any sleep. I guess Roger was yelling at night. Anyway, found a place nearby for him to go, the Californian, which is a nursing facility. And upon admittance, one of the expert people there said, you know, Roger's going to have a tough, long go of it. The next morning at 7:30, Candace got a call that Roger had passed.
Hmm.
So that fits in with those top 10 things you sent, Tom, about we know not the day or the time, and even people that think they know
Don't
are
know.
mistaken.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the same thing happened to my mother. She lived to be 99 3/4 years. She was in a place called the Villa Scalabrini
Yeah.
in Southern California. Do you know where that is, Gary?
Yep.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
my grandfather
It
was
was-
there for a while, yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place founded by the Scalabrini fathers and sisters, financed by Frank Sinatra. And who's the guy that had the big nose?
Bob Hope,
Durante.
Durante?
Bob Hope or Jack Benny? No, Bob Hope.
No,
Jimmy
he-
Durante?
Jimmy
yeah, he
Durante.
was famous. Yeah, Jimmy Durante.
Jimmy Durante, pardon me, yeah, Jimmy Durante.
And other people. Yeah, it's and
Oh, this is-
Father Nizani was the priest director there for a while. And at one point, my mom went into hospice, and then she outlived hospice. And Father Nizani said, George, your mother is amazing. She is immortal.
She's immortal.
Yeah, she kept outliving all the estimates of her livelihood.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know how I got on that topic. So that's another minute extension there. So anyway, so much. So anyway, Roger Ipswich. So if you could remember a prayer for him, that was a week ago, Saturday, I guess, that he passed away.
Okay.
And then the last thing I want to share with you, well, two more things. One happened dog walking this morning, but the one I want to share is I took a course from Julia Cameron. Anybody know Julia Cameron? She wrote a book called The Artist Way, which I guess is famous among certain segments. She was married, I just found out she was married to Martin Scorsese for 1 year. And then Martin met Lisa Minnelli. And that was the end of Julia Cameron, who then went into, if you go to Wikipedia and Google her, she was raised Catholic, and she went to Georgetown and then to Fordham. And I guess after her breakup, they had a son, and then she became an addict and really went downhill. And then she started writing and wrote a book called The Artist Way. She thinks artists and writing is a creative, spiritual thing. Anyway, for some reason, I signed up for a three-session course with her,
Julia.
and it was pretty amazing. Yeah, Julia Cameron. You can go to juliacameron.org, or you can go to Wikipedia and put in Julia Cameron. But she was actually part of the class. You know, people are doing this more and more. They will get somebody, Tom, you could do it, or Fred, you could hire somebody who knows about computers, and you could talk in little brief segments. And then they'll have a cluster. They'll say, okay, we're going to put you into clusters of 3. That's what they did. So you could talk with 2 other people very briefly about a list of things or topics that she suggested you do it. So anyway, I took the course, so it's really inspired me. One of the practices she has core practices for writing, and she talks about morning pages. As soon as you wake up in the morning, start writing write 3 pages worth. And then stop. And people say, well, why do you do that in the morning? Well, she says it's because your defenses aren't up yet. You're not reacting to things. And whatever comes out, you just write. So that was one of the practices. So for 2 weeks, I did that every morning. And anyway, she has other things. Anyway, that was a significant course that I took. It's kind of got my creative juices going. I think I'm going to do more writing. And also the writing I already did, I'm going to maybe put it online or on some platform or whatever. And then,
Can I
Yeah.
interject here?
sure,
If you're really interested in experimenting and writing and getting it online, there is a relatively new service. In fact, we've all run into it because what's her name? Richardson? Letters.
Fox Richardson.
Yeah. Yeah, she uses it. It's called Substack.
Substack.
Substack. That's the, because I'm seriously looking into that myself.
Are you? Okay.
And I'm, you know, I'm gonna have to follow this, Julia Cameron, because I like that idea of writing 3 pages in the morning. That might
Okay.
get me over my lifelong writer's block, beginning
Yeah.
as I'm about to turn 81 in another month or two.
Tom,
Maybe
Tom, I will send you the thing that hooked me into doing it. It has exactly to do what you're saying.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, it kind of hooked me into it, and I think you would like it.
But
Send it to all of us, George.
Substack can
Yeah,
be your best resource, I think, for just doing something and getting it out there. Then you may want to publish it in other ways and whatnot, but look at substack.com. I think
Yeah, I thought Substack that's what Robert Hubble and Richardson, yeah. Yeah, so that's if you want to do a daily newsletter or something, or weekly even, or whatever.
or
Yeah.
whatever. But
Okay.
you know, you can also just write things and put it up and then send it out, you know, build up a mailing list. Hey guys, what do you
Okay.
think of this, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. You know,
Okay. Sure. Thanks.
And George, I'm echoing what Frank had said. Why don't you just send it to all of us, the link to Julia's stuff?
Yes, I'll do that. Yeah.
Because others of us might be interested. I was thinking, you know, as you were describing when you wake up and writing, I did quite a number of years of dream work with a Jungian analyst. Did about almost 10 years worth. And we wouldn't wait. You don't wait till morning with dreams, because you'll swear you didn't have any dreams at all. You won't remember. So you wake up and basically you just record them, because writing's almost impossible. Besides, if you have a partner, you gotta get an elbow in the
That's
rib
right.
and shut up.
That's right. That's right.
And so, but I could whisper into it and not bother her.
Yeah.
And so, but that's what it reminded me of. And then I'm blanking on his name, but there was a Jungian therapist who used to run workshops on keeping an depth psychology journal, of which dream work was a piece, but also various meditation approaches and stuff. So it sounded very similar, sort of echoing what you were saying.
Yeah.
I still have the journal.
Very good. So I'll send you all a link. How's that? And also, she has a website with a lot of free materials on it. She's written poetry, some plays, and I guess she's a very spiritual person. It just says she was raised as Catholic, but I think she kind of expanded beyond that, whatever. Anyway, so much for that thing. Now the thing this morning, walking Moby, Moby wanted to go an extra block down to Solano, and we walked down a block on Solano, and then we're heading back, and on the corner of the street there was a black man sitting on something at the corner, and he was doing something with his hands, like making something. And I think he was the guy, and there was like something next to him, you know, where he carried his life's possessions and so forth. And I think I'd seen him at various places on Solano, sitting at a bus stop or during the winter or whatever. So I was just moved to go over, and I said something like, gee, I'd be glad to help you with breakfast. And I handed him a $20 bill. And he said, oh, thank you. Sure. Take one of these. And he went into his box there, and he pulled out a little, which I'll show you. I'll go out to the car and get it. So this would be a show and tell 1 minute here, but I'm holding off for another minute so I can show you these things later. So, and then he said, I guess he saw that I gave him a 20. And he says, hey, there's something else for you around the corner there. There's something else I made. So I go around the corner, and there's special thing. What he does is make sculptures out of tin cans, kind of recycle them. So I was trying to get the sculpture out of a rock. It had been stuck into a rock with the wire, and I was tempted to say, "Oh, this sculpture belongs here. It just won't come out." But he seemed to want me to have it, so I pulled it out and I said thank you, and I walked home with these two sculptures in my hand from this man. So it was kind of like two random acts of kindness, reciprocating each other. Anyway, so it was, whatever you make of it, it was a kind of a holy moment there, a sacramental moment on the street walking Moby.
Had you walked up the hill in the other direction to the edge of the park, you would have encountered hundreds of goats doing their annual mowing job of the hillside. They're still there along the schoolyard path. Here in the hills, they don't use mowers or anything that can spark. They use herds of goats. It's completely organic, and they fertilize as they do their job.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely amazing how much they just take it right down to the ground. They eat everything in sight except for the poison oak. And so, but anyway, that's up the hill. So my daughter has been with me the last few days, and her partner, and they're here. They'll be leaving. I'll just skip out shortly to see them off. They've been packing the car heading back down to LA. But we were in the park yesterday and tried to get a head count, but somewhere around 300 is what we agreed upon.
Goats.
That is one big herd of goats, and
Yes,
it
it's
is.
a lot of mowing.
We have a lot of, in Petaluma here, where I walk, we have the sheep that do the same thing. And
Sheep,
the guy, whoever owns it, has his little, puts them in he has a little barrier, and then moves the barrier, then they move on to the next plot.
exactly. They use electrified fencing here, Gary.
Oh, wow.
And they do in fact have like sheepdog, goat dog guardians. So I'm impressed with those. But the fence is electrified and people are warned. But even the fences, the batteries are recharged by solar panels. So the whole thing is so amazingly Berkeley organic.
Yeah.
And
So Bob, you've taken 3 of my minutes. Can I have? Can I have?
Hey George,
and your
George,
mention of goats.
thank you for yielding 3 minutes, and I'll keep count and subtract 3 from mine. I'm want to yak away anyway, so.
Yeah, so now I need 1 more minute because
Go.
your mention of goats brings to mind squirrels and crows, and we have oddly enough, a lot of wildlife here, such as Bob is describing. There are coyotes in the area. There were deer next to our house, and we don't live in a rural area. It's about a mile or so up to the Wildcat Canyon and so forth. But the deer come down, and the coyotes take people's cats. Our neighbor lost a beautiful cat to a coyote, and there is squirrels in our front yard, which I give peanuts to, and I toss some bird seed out along the curb there. But let me ask for your advice, because I don't know what to do about this. But in our garage, we store some food on some shelves, and I put like a bag of this or a bag of that, or if I get chips from the store, from Costco in a big bag, I put it out there. So recently, as of about a month or so, there would be holes in the bag. And so, what are you laughing at, Gary? What does that mean to you?
Rats.
A mouse or a rat? Yeah.
Yeah.
So sure enough, but I didn't want my wife to know, so I would go out because she would freak out. She's a very neat Nick, and she'd go crazy if she knew that. But I think she's discovered it because I went to Ace Hardware and got a metal plate to put over a little hole, which I thought, well, first I used duct tape, and the duct tape was bitten through.
Yeah.
So then I got a piece of cardboard and taped it over the hole, and that was removed by whatever creature it is. And And then I got a metal plate just before we left on the last trip and got two big rocks and held it up against the hole. And I thought, well, that'll do it. But then the night after we came back, I had a bag, like a shopping bag from Whole Foods that had some dog treats, and the thing had bitten through the corner of this bag, and the remnants were left on the floor. And my wife went down there to do some laundry, and she says, "George, what are these things on the floor here? Where are they from?" And so anyway, she's discovered that there's something there. But right now I am secretly feeding the thing outside its hole by putting some dog kibble next to the hole, kind of with a bargain with this thing not to bother us if I voluntarily feed it something.
George, first of all, number one, it's not, don't say thing in singular. It will be plural.
Things. Okay,
will be
it'll
plural.
be,
They
that's
will
right,
be
there'll be
plural.
little things, right? Yeah,
And George,
anyway,
yeah, I have an infallible solution to the problem, but you'll have to catch them in the act. But if you do, you'll never see them again. What you have to do is this: put on your stole, grab
Yeah.
holy water, grab oils, baptize them, and confirm.
I don't
them
have
and
any of those things, Bob. I'll
Baptize
have
them
to
and
call you
confirm
here.
them, and you'll never see them again.
You're gone. Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, get your local rabbi to circumcise him.
Yeah.
There.
Okay, well, thank you for these ideas. So anyway, I'm done with my 3 minutes here. I'll
And
pass.
if none of that
Yes.
works, you can call it pest control.
Yeah,
Now,
If all else
George,
fails.
I was in Ace Hardware yesterday. And one of the things that I noticed, we've been bothered with mice and rats, but not lately, thank the Lord, knock on wood. But one of the things I noticed, they do have a rat trap there that catches, mouse trap anyway, that catches the mouse alive, and you can release it humanely. But it tells you, the directions tell you to release it at least 2 miles from your house.
What about that other person's house next door?
well, I can send it to any of you via,
Well, I could go up to those,
Yeah.
$20 million mansions right up here on Palos
Oh.
Verdes
yeah,
There,
and release it up there.
there.
but that's
There
probably
you
where they
go.
came from.
Well, then they'll have a truck
They,
back.
they probably bought them down to your place. Anyway, well, how does it catch the mice without killing it? Is
has
it a
trap door
cage?
behind, the bait is there and then it has a trap door behind it.
And then and then the door closes when it comes in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you
Okay,
can open up
yeah.
the other end to let it out.
Okay, I think I'll look into that. Thank you, because I don't want to kill the poor thing. Have any of you read Moby Herman Melville's short story
Moby
called
Dick. Moby Dick.
Bartleby the Scrivener?
No.
Have you ever read that short story?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, read it. It's fascinating. Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville.
You can release it on your walks with Bob.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
Yeah.
true,
Now,
either
what's
up
the
the
name of
hill-
the
Yeah, we
walk again,
can,
Bob?
yeah, we
I'll
can
go-
take it up to Blake Gardens. That's
I'm
right.
not sure- I'm not sure we get through the gate with a critter at Blake Garden.
Yeah, but we could
Well, we
go
could
in
do it, Bob.
disguise. I could
At
Put it in
any-
your pocket.
at
I
any-
could put it in my backpack. Yeah. Or I could have Moby carried in. How's that?
Right.
Anyway, I
You've gone over your
see,
3 minutes, George.
I know,
Welcome, Norm.
I'm
Hey,
done.
You're welcome,
Hey,
thank
hey,
you.
George, we've really missed you regularly.
I'm finished.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we gave you 3 minutes for every time that you haven't
Missed.
been online with us,
Yes.
Yeah, and the next 3 times too.
at least.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody else have something exciting?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Tim.
So
we have a newly ordained priest in my community who is part of the ordinariate of the chair of St. Peter, and he had been previously a Methodist minister. It's a kid with 6 kids, a man with 6 kids. And he had his first mass in our church on Sunday morning. And they have bought an old Baptist church here in Flat Rock, which is the small town I live in, and they are converting it to a Catholic church over time. But so first of all, it reminded me of a couple of times we've gone to church in Westminster Abbey in London. It is just old timey song after song after song. But maybe, Tom, this question is more for you. The liturgy was very different from the liturgy that we customarily do. There were lots of different prayers, both before communion, after communion. And so my question is, who decides who makes up the liturgies that different rites can do? So this is the chair of St. Peter. It's Stephen Lopes is the bishop out of, I think, Houston or San Antonio. So how does this happen that they can have a very different liturgy?
May I respectfully request or suggest that the question is posed wrong?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't think the question should be who decides. I think the question is, how is that decision made? How is it that in a branch, what's becoming, I think, a branch of the Latin Rite, that there may be, alternative versions happening. Let's remember one thing, that widespread before the Council of Trent, there were those kinds of variations everywhere. The particular kinds of variations you're talking about, different prayers at different places in the Mass, coming from different sources and all of that. I would suspect that for that particular ritual, that there are elements of the Book of Common Prayer that have been incorporated.
And also, if I could just jump in, when you said Methodist, formally Methodist probably become an Episcopal priest, because the ordinariate of St. Peter, as in my understanding, is limited to formally Anglican Episcopal Anglican priests.
Yeah,
that's
Am I
true.
wrong?
And Steve Lopes is the ordinary of that group.
Right, he is, and he's a former San Francisco priest,
Yeah.
gone to Rome with Leveda,
Yeah.
made a Monsignor, and then made a bishop, and then made
Well, Bob,
ordinary. for that
no,
group.
he was a Methodist minister in South Carolina. He has never been an Anglican minister.
Well, this is news and new information for me. Very well could very well be.
Well, historically, the Methodists consider themselves, I think, a branch of the Anglicans.
John Wesley was an Episcopal priest.
They were a Reformed movement. So the boundaries may be a little more permeable than we may be accustomed to think.
What, wasn't it Benedict that kind of set that up? And didn't he in the in the decree or the document or whatever say that it was an attempt to bring them into the Catholic Church and allow them to bring elements of their Anglican heritage with them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And so that's like the Book of Common Prayer.
Right.
That's specifically where what Tom referred to might be coming from.
Right.
I haven't gone into detail on this. It might be interesting to pursue it a little bit more, but after World War II, didn't Pius XII allow a number of German Lutheran ministers to be ordained Catholic and, retain their families?
Could well be.
I think he was kind of the pioneer, maybe the unsung pioneer of opening the doors to Protestant ministers being received and maintaining at least something of their former customs and former ways of life.
Right. Tom, you're a good researcher, and should you find a specific reference to Pius XII, and that would be of particular interest to me, and I suspect maybe some of the brethren here.
Not
And
many.
so it was.
I could do it too.
Really. It was really. I mean, so this was his first mass. He was ordained a week ago Thursday in Texas, and so he came home, and it's a very different characteristic of the congregation compared to what we normally have, where we normally have a lot of old people and 50% Hispanics. This was probably, I think his parish has 60 families in it already. They are young. They come in with 5 or 6 kids. They're very devout. In fact, his son was one of the acolytes during the mass, which I thought was a very touching and beautiful thing to see. And so it's really kind of neat. And his new church is about 8 minutes from where I live. And so maybe some days, whereas my parish is like all of 12 minutes, which is a long schlep for me.
Right.
And so maybe we'll occasionally go there. But my second question for you guys is, and I raised this with my Cursillo group yesterday with nobody having an answer. So yesterday's reading from Genesis was Abraham taking Isaac up to the mountain to sacrifice him. And so one of my friends in Cursillo says one way that he tries to understand Gospels and stuff is to put himself as being there, like following along, what would it have been like to be, there. And so I'm wondering, what is it? What'd you say?
Very Ignatian.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And so, this is kind of a trivial thing that just came to me when I was reading the passage yesterday. Is what kind of conversation do you think Isaac and his dad had as they were coming down the mountain after Isaac had been tied up, put on top of this pile of logs? His dad had a knife out and was going to sacrifice him. And, what in the world do you think they talked about?
Would you really
wondered that too.
Well,
Would you
Well,
really
I've got
have
the-
done it, Dad? Would you really have done it? Really?
I've got the first sentence too. It'd be, holy shit, Dad, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
I think it'd probably be, what should we tell Mom?
That's good.
There was yesterday, I did read a few different commentaries about that, because it's always been one of the most puzzling stories in the scriptures. I mean, from a psychological point of view, if you want to put it that way, one of the commentators asked, what kind of relationship did Isaac have with his father after that? Precisely,
Yeah.
Well, and so there was a case about 10 years ago in the upstate of South Carolina where a mother, her name was Susan Smith, claimed that she had been hearing voices from God, and she put her kids in the back of her car and she drove into a lake and drowned all of them. And she said that she had been told to do that by God. And she survived, sadly, she survived and was sentenced to life in prison. But she kept using this divine message. I was receiving these messages from God, from heaven, that I had to sacrifice my kids. I guess in today's age, Abraham would be shit out of luck, in terms of law enforcement people. But it just was curious to me, Gary, that, and I was looking for commentary on it. And then the other last question, I won't take as much time as Ferric did. Whatever happened to Ishmael? So Ishmael and his mom Hagar, I think that was her name, were kind of kicked out of the territory. But in the passage, it says that you will be prosperous, you will be the head of many, many different nations. Do we know? Is there any
Yes.
kind of
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes, I can't shut up right here, because Ishmael is the father of the Arab people and of Islam. Really the
Yeah.
ancestor of Islam. Right now, the Muslims are celebrating Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, which only happens once a year. And it's commemorating in rituals the journey and the despair and the rescue of Hagar and Ishmael
really?
there in what later became Mecca. Yeah, so if you read about the Hajj and the rituals are actually recounting and embodying some of the stories in the Quran about Ishmael and Abraham, and you know, there's a story in the Quran of Abraham doing some similar thing, sacrificing Ishmael, as I recall it. I made a study of this years ago, but some of it has, you know.
Good.
Same here. You got
happens
it pretty right on, Tom.
Does that,
But
yeah.
But you
Had
know, it really is amazing that what we have playing out between among Christians, Jews, and Muslims is the story of the descendants of Abraham.
Yes.
So we need to, you know, and I've been part of, in fact, there's a 3-part series that the Pacifica Institute did here some years back. It's online, where a Christian, me, and a Muslim and a Jewish scholar all gave presentations about how how we can find our unity, I think, in Father Abraham. And so we've got it's kind of an interesting thing. I'll send you the link to it if you can endure watching it. But I found it very fascinating to be somewhat working with these other 2 people in dialogue. A second point that I'd like to make from what you're saying about this story in yesterday's first reading, it just dawned on me, it struck me as we were reading it here at the Mass. Abraham named that site Yahweh Yireh, which I think means on this, well, hence people will now say, on this mountain, the Lord will see. Now, it's very interesting that God did not reveal his name Yahweh for what? 4 or 5 centuries? So this is obviously a reconstructed story after the time of Moses.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So this story is being told with a lot of hindsight between whatever the original event was and the time that it was actually written down. So whatever that might mean for its interpretation, it's very clear that Abraham could not have named that site Yahweh Yireh himself.
Aren't those, some of those are origin stories, I think.
Yeah, they're origin stories.
Yeah. And also I read one small, I don't know where this is just, I didn't do research. I just read a couple of things, and one was that it was also why the part of the Jewish prohibition against child sacrifice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was written in view of that. My own personal feeling, and I'm saying that's a little bit tongue in cheek here, but not totally. God put that story about Abraham and Isaac into the book of Genesis to give Jews something to argue about for the rest of their existence. Maybe Jews and Christians something to argue about.
Well, you know, also my my kind
It's
of
okay.
facetious aside that what do we tell mom is interesting, because the day before in the reading, it was about Sarah asking Abraham to get rid of Ishmael
Mhm.
because she saw him as a threat to Isaac's inheritance.
Mhm.
And that
That's right.
Abraham was reluctant to get rid of Ishmael because, and then God eventually promises Ishmael that he also will be a great nation. So Abraham, in the middle of this, it seems to me, becomes the sacrifice thing is almost out of character to what led up to it, because he's the protector of both sons.
Yeah.
And he's ready to sacrifice his own progeny. I mean, you know,
Well, he's the father of Ishmael as well, you know,
Yeah.
by another woman, but nevertheless
Yeah.
his father.
Hagar, yeah.
And so he shows himself against Sarah's desire to protect Isaac. Abraham's unwilling and has to almost be forced, and then gets assured by God that Ishmael will also have a great nation.
So Frank, what do you suppose they did say to mom? Go ahead. What did they say to mom?
Dad and I had a nice talk, and God gave us assurances.
And God is faithful. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah.
Maybe Abraham was saying, don't breathe a word of this to your mother.
Yeah, most likely so.
Well, you know, maybe
Well,
there
thank-
was
thank-
you know, I'm thinking maybe there was an Oedipus complex where mother was doting too much on Isaac and Abraham was jealous and wanted to get rid of his son.
Right.
The Oedipus
oh,
interaction there. What about that? You know, I can
So-
remember doing a
That's very
counseling. Yeah,
Were they aware of the ancient myths? Was there Greek influence there? I don't think so, but who knows?
no, but maybe the Greeks didn't invent it. They just put it into words.
well, the
It could
Greek
be
myth
something.
would have been developed later. You know, there's probably an awful lot of cross-fertilization of ideas going on.
You know what, Tom, I sometimes think that and others may want to jump in, but we probably sell our forebears, ancient ones, short in terms of how much communication probably was going on, how much travel via
Oh.
trade was going on, and cross-fertilization of ideas. We just don't
Oh, yeah.
have the written results because it was hard to take notes on a piece of clay and bake it and the whole and the whole bit. And so but I'll bet you know the spoken word and the role of the storytellers in the communities was such that there's a great deal more cross-fertilization used to go on. So not out of the
Oh.
question, those influences.
You know, I think that's very, very true. Two little instances that I'd like to point out is, you know, I led pilgrimages to Turkey, the early Christian world. People say, why didn't you call it the footsteps of St. Paul? And I said, if you wanted to follow the footsteps of St. Paul, you'd have to walk 20,000 miles. And, you know, St. Paul is the one that got written about. But early and probably somewhat reliable traditions have St. Thomas going back and forth to India.
Didn't somebody go to Spain?
And,
St. James or somebody?
St. James
Yeah.
reputed to go to Spain. I think that's hogwash, but they've built up a wonderful pilgrimage industry around that. Um,
I don't know about
but,
this.
you know, they were all over the place. So
Yes.
of course they brought ideas with them. You know, that's one of the things that also gave rise to the dynamic and sometimes problematic pre-Tridentine liturgies. That, you know, a bishop might go to some other see and say, oh, they're doing something really neat here. We should do that back home. And then you go back and of course, well, I think they were doing it this way. Maybe they did it that way. You know, he'd end up getting it all screwed up.
You have to check with Cardinal Sarah.
Well, yeah, but Cardinal Sarah was probably, I'll try not to be racist there. I was going to make a statement about his ancestry that
That's true.
I
Well,
should
yeah,
not,
yeah.
I should not say,
It's the ancient world. Yeah.
but it is the ancient world.
Right.
And you know,
Quick-
when we talk about Africans, people talk about, you know, Augustine being half African, meaning half black. Well, no, there was no connection with sub-Saharan Africa there. His mother was a Berber.
Mhm.
Hey, quick process question. Norm, whatever you're doing or not doing, congratulations. My brain isn't hopping around with flashing. So what have you done?
I'm using my iPhone instead of my computer.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, because it's a lovely picture and sound.
Now, Norm, we advised George earlier to hold his iPhone horizontal. And that enables you to see more on the screen and it gives us a little better picture too. There you
There
go.
we go.
Better?
That is better.
All right.
And you see better too?
Tom.
Okay.
Good
Hey,
point.
hey, Johnny Grimmer. Are you gonna move to the communal living situation soon?
Yes, yesterday I passed the inspection with the nurse and we took a look at the second floor
From the doctor.
suite that I'll have. So the moving will be in,
Oh, not his papers from yesterday. Those are his
Oh,
instructions.
Fred, can you put your sound on? There you go.
I muted Fred for the moment.
Great.
And unmute yourself, Fred, when there's no distraction.
So Johnny, when are you going?
it'll be in steps during the
Okay.
next 10 days or thereabouts.
That's
I'm
pretty
happy
quick.
about the move. I don't know if rest of you are aware, I've chosen the spot in Orange that is actually the neighbor of Holy Family Parish.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And my sister Gail only lives about a half a mile away.
Wow.
So
Great.
I like the place. Total residents is 99 capacity, right now 90 residents. And you'll get a kick out of this. In my tour yesterday, I met the chef and he had a big M on his shirt. He's a big Michigan University alumnus and football fan. And it's clear he and I will be discussing sports a lot. We hit it off right away.
All right.
3 meals a day. You can take some back to your room. So I've got a condo and not a condo. I have a microwave and a refrigerator, a step-in shower, just beautiful place. I'm very, very pleased.
Well,
John,
great.
can you
Have you been down to the dining room yet?
Oh, yes.
Is it all old people?
Yeah.
Well,
I think one or two of them is older than I am. No, I'm kidding. There are folks anywhere from, it appears, 70 to 95.
Okay, okay.
Did you ask the most important question? How's their Wi-Fi?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah, good point, Tommy.
we
Most of
used
them
our, we used our Wi-Fi there, our cell phones there.
Yeah, but that might have been the cell phone data connection.
That could be.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna make a note.
Yeah. So John, are you going to lead an RCIA course there?
Hell no, not just no, hell no.
Ooh,
I'm not ready for that. I have torn up and thrown away so many old lesson plans that I used to teach from. And I just thank God that I'm not in that mode anymore.
Okay,
Well, we hope the move goes very smoothly and that you are content and taken care of. That's my prayer for you.
Well,
Well,
he already seems to have made a very good first good step in befriending the chef.
There you go.
that's right.
Wise move, John. Wise move.
the second person to befriend as soon as possible is the maintenance director.
good point. I thought you were gonna say laundry, but maintenance is even better.
Well,
Yeah,
assuming
Different kind of
laundry as a
maintenance.
portion is part of maintenance facilities. Yeah.
So
yeah,
they'll-
just think of Father Barr. He was great at kind of befriending people like that.
that's right.
You know, the
God bless
gardener,
him.
yeah.
I miss him. Oh,
But Johnny, I was a bit worried about you last week when you talked about going there and you fainted. I thought maybe they would have checked you out and said, you're not eligible because because you fainted
No.
upon seeing this place.
I
And then
No,
I thought,
you're-
I
and then I
spent
thought
an
maybe,
hou-
yeah,
listen for a minute. I spent an hour and a half with their nurse. It was a 12-page questionnaire, and we had to deliver reports from my primary doctor. I think you know I have Kaiser. So they are very, very thorough on all this. And checked me out on how I move around with my walker. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure their insurance people are all over that process.
Great.
Yeah.
Who
So that's
runs
another,
that center,
that's another
John?
person.
Who runs the place? Is it connected with the church or it's just near that parish?
It is next, it's immediately adjacent to the parish, but not affiliated with the parish.
Mhm.
Separate financial entity, which looks very prosperous. And
What's the name of the place again?
Park Plaza. Park Plaza, Orange, California.
A very prominent hotel in Boston.
Yeah.
Wonder if they're affiliated.
I
think he gets reciprocals.
A question about the spelling. Is it P-A-R-K or P-A-R-Q-U-E?
It is P-A-R-K. Thank you.
In Boston, it's
I'm surprised
P-A-R-Q-U-E.
you could check. Thanks, Tom.
Spelling it the other way.
And there's no, and there's,
Q-U-E in Boston, Tom.
Oh,
No, I'm kidding.
but they don't pronounce the R in Boston, do they?
No, it's Park.
Park.
Ah,
There you
Park.
go.
Park Plaza.
and there's
Did
no
anyone
tunnel or,
see, Michael Winters, Sean Winters' article today on First Things? And the last line is that he thinks that he's critical of some of the stuff Weigel and some others have on Francis and the Synod. And he said something like, it looks to me like First Things is heading to changing their name to Last Gasps.
I wanted to thank Gary for the reminiscence about his golfing with the Peanuts.
Oh, Sparky Schultz, yeah.
Sparky,
Yeah,
That was
Sparky.
fun to listen to.
yeah,
Oh,
it was.
did you watch it? I haven't watched it.
Oh, it was good. It was very
you-
good.
I recommended everybody
will
watch it.
enjoy it.
I enjoyed it a lot. But do you have any stories about Sparky that didn't get into that interview?
I don't know. I have to look at it. Did I tell you the one when I always remember, he was fascinated that I was a Catholic priest, and he would ask questions, a lot of questions that were kind of, because Sparky went beyond. He was a very spiritual guy, but he went, much deeper than church stuff. I mean, he's. But I remember one of the guys that played, and I don't know if I said this in the interview, but one of the guys that played golf with us was a guy named Larry James, who had been a Mormon and then became a Catholic. Larry was kind of a rough cut. And somewhere along the line, he started talking about holy water. And Sparky turned to me and he said, holy water. He said, what makes water holy? And I said, I hate when you ask questions like that. And playing golf with Sparky, no matter what you said, sooner or later it would come back to haunt you. And I don't know, it was a few weeks later, I just remember we were teeing off on a hole that has two little lakes in front of it. That's always meant to kind of distract you when you're getting ready to hit the golf ball. And he and Larry were on one team, and this guy, Bob Murado, and I were always on the other team. I was getting ready to tee off, and he said, oh, stop just for a second, Gary. He said, I just want you to notice those two lakes in front, trying to get you to focus on that, and because he was very competitive. And he said, the funny thing about those lakes is, he says that one of them, he says, there's a lot more water underneath than there is on top. And he says, and the other thing is that one of those lakes has holy water in it, and the other one doesn't.
Has anybody read The Gospel According to Peanuts?
No.
Robert Short. I read it way back when, and I see it still in print.
Oh, great. Who's the author of it?
Robert Short, Short.
Uh-huh.
Sparky had met him, but he took a lot of the things, and then I read parts of it, but I never read.
You may have been his theological advisor. You might have gotten
right.
the script more than you think.
No, actually, I have 4 original panels on my wall where he inscribed them, and they stem from conversations that we had. So
well, if you ever need to, those will enhance your retirement, Gary.
well,
Who is this Sparky? Who is Sparky?
Charles Schultz.
Peanuts.
That's the word.
Oh, he's the guy that wrote it.
Yeah.
He's not. I've got all these books. I've never read them. I never really used to read the strip, to be honest with you. And I began to read it after I met him, but I still haven't followed it closely. It's still published in this area here because he is really, Santa Rosa is
Still published in the LA Times too.
Yeah,
all the old reruns.
But his uncle called him Sparky after there was a little horse called Sparkplug, and all the people who know him call him Sparky. You never, if anybody were ever to say, I'm a good friend of Charlie Schultz, you know that person does not know him because he doesn't. You never call him Charlie. When I first met him, I called him Charles or Mr. Schultz. And then it isn't that he made you do it. It's just that was just kind of but I don't know if Larry told me, because Larry was a good friend of his. If Larry told me that, you know, you don't call him Charlie. But as time went on, you know, we became good friends, and Sparky was just the natural word. Everybody who knows him called him Sparky.
So
Hey,
Gary,
Gary, did any of your conversations with him end up in comic strips?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I have some original panels.
No.
Oh.
Did any of the amusing conversations you had end up in any of his characters, do you think?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, well, I mean, like, there's one. Yeah, there was one. I was talking to him one day about, you know, remember the story where what's his name? Is it Elijah who's having the battle with the priest of Baal?
Yeah.
And they're having a contest to see if, you know, if God would send down fire or something, or water. What was it? And he said, and the priest of Baal are yelling at God and this and that, and the commentary, the writer says, no one answered and no one was listening. You know, you've seen that story.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
I love that story.
Yeah, and that became a strip. Where,
no kidding.
I forget. I'd have to go back. I'd have to bring it over here and show it to you. I forget who it is. It's not Lucy. It's I forget which. But she says something about that in the classroom, and then but it becomes a strip. That became a strip.
Well, I think Linus was always the kind of philosopher theologian.
Yeah.
In the strip, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I really, to be honest with you, and it's terrible because I've been on a few panels that the museum has put on for fans of Peanuts, and these people know everything. I mean, and I really didn't, to be honest with you. He was a good friend. I just never really read the strip. I mean, really, I don't know why. It just wasn't. I don't read comics. Maybe Doonesbury, you know. But so, and then when people would ask, well, who's your favorite character? Well, I didn't. I would say my favorite character was Charlie Brown, because Charlie Brown is Sparky Schultz. I mean, he was a man who was very much in touch with the underside of life. I mean, the incomprehensibility of life. You know, you know, like when on my 25th anniversary up in Ukiah, the parishioners, they had a dinner one night for about 100 people. Then the next day they had a big celebration at Carl Purdy Hall for the whole parish. But just they wanted me to invite my family and my closest friends, and so Sparky came. And of course, this guy Thomas was saying, "I want you to go around and say, how did you meet Gary?" Because everybody's going. Sparky gets up. He says, "My name is Charles Schultz, and I met Gary in a sand trap." You know, so he sat with a cousin of mine who asked him. He says, "Will Charlie Brown ever kick the football?" And Sparky Schultz said, "Never." You know. So he was in touch with, you know, you hit a golf ball. I mean, I'd hit a bad shot, and my partner Bob Murata would always try to encourage me because I get really down on myself. I've always said I'm a fairly mature man until I get onto a golf course, then I become a raving idiot, and a very depressing kind of person to be. I wouldn't want to golf with me. It's tough enough to live with, but. Bob would always try to encourage me, and Sparky would say, "It just never changes, does it?" You know, and he because he understood what it was like. I mean, I remember him telling me a story. He was so depressed after a golf game. He came home. He took his golf clubs out, and he threw him against the wall. You know, if you've never played golf, if you played golf, you'll understand. If you haven't, you won't understand. But it's sometimes it could ruin your day, you know, playing so poorly. But anyway, but he always understood the incomprehensibility of life. That's why Charlie Brown to me is Sparky Schultz.
Mhm. Sure.
So Gary, about the museum, I've got like a 12, a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old.
They'd have a great time. Yeah.
Would they have a good time there?
I think so.
And do they have stuff for adults too? I mean, is it something that everybody could relate to in some way?
You know, I've been to the museum a few times. I always support it. I get, you know, the membership and all that, just because it's Sparky. But do those kids know much about Peanuts?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if they do or not, but it could be a good introduction, perhaps.
Yeah,
I know that you know they come out here, and we could go up there to Santa Rosa. Yeah, make the trip. Is that
nice.
something?
It's a nice. Yeah, and you see, there's a wall. There's a big wall with all these panels, and there's actually they reconstructed his office.
So do you know what personal experiences Sparky had that brought about the incomprehensibility of life? Was there any tragedy or anything that he experienced, or was it just being in touch with reality?
I think that was it.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know that he had any. In fact, there were people who thought he might be clinically depressed.
Really?
Well, he might have had a Lucy in his life.
Yeah.
Well, he did have a little red hair.
That's it, Fred. Yeah.
He did have a little red-haired girl. I mean, I think that was someone that he was at one point younger in love with, some little
red-haired girl.
But the
well, did he have kids himself?
Yes,
he did.
Yeah, he had I think 4, 2 boys.
Five.
Greg and Monty and Jill and had 2 other girls. I forget. 5 girls, yeah. And then he was married to a woman named Joyce, and then they divorced. And then he ended up marrying Jeannie Schultz, who I know. She's the one that I know, Jeannie. In fact, we every so often our paths cross, and sometimes we'll be together for various things. You know, we used to have, there was a group of us who would play golf every November in honor of his birthday, because we used to do that with him at one point. And then after he died, we continued that for a while, you know. So, and then, like I said this last week, I visited a guy in the rest home. He's 99 now, Chuck Bartley, and he was a very close friend of Sparky's, and he's got all kinds of books in his little room where he is. And but he was a very unassuming guy. I mean, he had, you know, I remember one time, I mean, he just, like one day he was telling us, he went to he would go to, well, I remember one time, Robin, remember the movie, the TV show called The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
Yeah.
Well, they contacted him and they wanted to do a segment on him, and he said no. They said, well, he says, I have no lifestyle. And I said, Sparky, can you imagine if they had done it on you and tried to follow you around? You'd get up in the morning, every morning, and you go, he had a little gym that he would go to, some little, you know, for a little bit exercise. And then you'd go to the office and you'd sit at your desk, which would be blank. and then just try to come up. He told me, he said, every morning I just sit down at a blank desk and try to come up with something. Once in a while I have an idea, sometimes I'll just draw a few characters and see if something begins to happen, you know. But they said they would watch you sit at your desk, and then at noon you'd go over to the ice arena, which was which he built because he loved hockey.
Have him hang the painting behind the couch.
Yeah, and he'd eat at the Warm Puppy, which is a little restaurant there, you know, that they have at the ice arena. And then he'd
The
go
Warm
back to the
Puppy.
office. Yeah, they go back to the office, and then they'd go home. And maybe they would cook. Ginny wasn't much of a cook, or they'd go out. We might go to a movie. Except on Thursdays when we would meet Bob and Gary and Larry for golf at 11:52, and we'd have a hamburger at Yoshi's Hamburger Snack. I mean, and then that was the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
You could have gotten on TV.
Huh?
You could have gotten on TV if he had agreed.
Oh
to
yeah, yeah. But anyway, but he was very wealthy. I mean, I remember, you know, I was drinking a A&W root beer, and there's little Snoopies on the, you know, cartoons on the can, and he said, "Yeah, every time you drink one of those, I make money." You know, because he had this person who began to, I forget her name now, because he was just a cartoonist, and you know, he was syndicated all over, and you know, and was very successful.
Yeah.
But then this woman, I forget her name, it will come to me later on.
An agent?
Huh?
His agent.
No, she was just a lady who wanted to, she became a licensee. She got the license from him to do calendars. And she and her, whatever her lady friend was, they made like, I don't know how many calendars, and sold out in no time. And she created a company. And then he made a lot of money because his stuff was licensed, you know. He had the MetLife blimp and all those things, you know, and that's where, but I do remember one day we were playing golf, and that morning in the paper, he had just fired his CFO. And so I said, "Oh, gee, Sparky, I see that you let Ron Nelson go." He says, "Yeah." He says, "He was trying to trade on my name, you know." And Sparky says, "You know," he says, "I do pay attention to the business side of things, but I'm not swamped by it." But he says, like, for example, one guy called me one time to say, you know, "Would you like to invest in some sort of insurance, something or other?" And Sparky said, he says, "Look at," he says, "I make $1 million a month." He says, "Why do I want to invest in some sort of insurance thing?" You know, he was one of the wealthiest, I think one of the wealthiest celebrities in the United States at one point. But you'd never know it.
Yeah.
You'd never know it. I mean, you know, one day he said he was in the finished golf, and he went over to the.
Thank you, Bob.
He went to the drugstore to buy some toothpaste, and he's standing in line, and a lady said, "No." "You," she said, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" He says, "Well, I want to buy some toothpaste." You know, I mean, he was just that kind of a guy.
Mhm.
Very unassuming.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Fred, Bob, Bono, and Norm. We haven't heard.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
used to love the Schultz's stuff in the paper. I loved reading his peanut stuff. It was beautiful. Really, really thoughtful. I'm glad that you were, Gary, you had a chance to be with him and get to know him and get to know his real self.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's to me it's awesome.
Is he still alive?
No, he
Okay.
died in 2000.
Oh, I have
Okay.
a question, Gary, that I sent you. Did you, when you said prepare your funeral homily, did
Yeah.
you actually preside at his funeral?
There were two. There was just a family thing, and I did that. And that was at a cemetery in Sebastopol. Then there was a public celebration. And I was part of it, but I didn't preside at it. But I forget what I did at that point. Yeah. So
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Tim and do I understand that priest that was just ordained and said mass at your church, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
But he also had another church down the road, which was his Episcopal church.
No. They, for his congregation, they have recently purchased a Baptist church that was no longer functioning, a little tiny one that holds like 100 people. And so they are building that out. You know, they're trying to buy tabernacles, ambos, and all that stuff. No, so no. And so,
So right
and
now,
I checked.
is he celebrating mass regularly for his church, for his community at your church?
Well, I think he will do that, but it's only been 5 days since he said his very first mass. But I think the plan is, until his church is open, is that he will use our church, you know. And for the last several years, ordinary priests have come to my church and have celebrated mass there for their small community or anyone else who wanted to come. And I just checked with a friend of mine because this is a question. Is he was raised Baptist. Joshua was raised Baptist, converted to Methodism, and was a Methodist pastor in South Carolina, never Anglican, never Episcopalian. And 8 years ago, he started his spiritual journey to Catholicism. And he converted to Catholicism 7 years ago, and then went into priestly formation 4 years ago. So he's been in some sort of formation for the Catholic priesthood for 4 years. So,
and he's still married.
Still married with 6 kids. Yeah.
What, you
Yeah.
mean they didn't, you mean his wife's not in a convent and his kids underage aren't in orphanages? Are you telling me all crows aren't black? Is that what you're telling me? All crows aren't black? Celibacy and all that?
I hate to disappoint you.
Ah,
Yeah.
Why did he have his first mass at your parish? I mean, was he from your town?
Oh, he's actually, his home is about 15 miles from here, and the parish that he's creating or is being created is like 5 minutes from Immaculate Conception, you know, my parish. But they have chosen to have, instead of continuing to have Immaculate Conception be their parish home, they raised the money and bought this little Baptist church that was empty and no longer being used. And they are in the process of Catholicizing it, if there's such a word in the English language.
I like it.
Tim,
Yeah.
I have a question. Is he starting that church as an assignment from his bishop? Or did he go to the bishop and say, hey, I think there's a real fruitful territory here. I'd like to start a church here?
It was exactly that way. When he converted to Catholicism, he's a very evangelistic kind of guy. I mean, just a wonderful spirit of a guy. And it was exactly that way, Tom, is that he said, I think we've got a nucleus for a parish among former Methodists and Episcopalians and Anglicans who are looking for an alternative because of the kind of divisions that were going on in the Episcopalian and Methodist Church over same-sex marriage, blah, 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 blah. And that's how it got started, Tom. Is he approached the bishop and said, you know, how about if I try to form a community here? And as I said, he's up to 60 families,
That
you know,
sounds
which
great.
is,
Which
Yeah.
bishop are you talking about, Tim?
Steve Lopes.
Of Steve Lopes, and that's okay with the diocesan bishop? I
With
guess.
mine, oh yeah, in fact, not
yeah.
at, Gary, that's interesting, not at first. Not at first, my bishop is kind of an asshole. And he did, because I think what,
Oh, and
the
you,
way it was is that we'd like
being
to have a,
like being a little bit pregnant, or is
Yeah,
that-
don't hold back. Don't hold back there, Tim.
and so what they
is
did,
he-
once this small community was formed, and they converted to Catholicism, and I'm not sure I know how that happened, okay? They wanted to have mass, they wanted to be able to celebrate mass under the ordinary liturgy. And so what I understood is that Steve Lopes called my bishop, and the bishop was initially reluctant to allow them to come and celebrate mass in our parish church. But somehow it worked itself up to some higher level person, and my bishop was told, you will do this. Benedict was very clear, is that we will cooperate with the formation of this new community. And so for the last 4 years, they've been bringing in visiting ordinariate priests from around the United States. And so they had mass maybe every 3 weeks, and they'd fly a priest in from Texas or Virginia. The nearest one is down in Athens, Georgia, which is 3 hours away. And so they did have a regular but infrequent celebration of mass, for this newly converted. There are everyone who is in this nucleus were formerly either Baptist, Methodist, or Episcopalians. Yeah.
Tim, do you have any idea the number of communities like this under Lopes's episcopacy? I mean, for the chair of St. Peter, about how many across the U.S.? And for some reason, the South is drawing them. I understand Texas.
Virginia, I don't know that answer, but Father Joshua sent out a prayer request, and he said that at the present time, there are 29 married men who are in seminary for the ordinariate, 29, which I thought was, that's amazing,
Yeah.
And so these are all guys that have either been Methodist or Episcopal priests, that are in the process of being
Yes.
Catholicized. I don't know what is the proper term.
Well, I don't know what it is, but I kind of have problems with this.
Go ahead, Frank. I want to hit this.
Because if they want to join Catholicism because they don't like where they are, does that mean that eventually, and so I'm not against I think the diversity and all of that is, beneficial. The charism, the religious charism is beneficial. But if it turns out that it's centripetal to the charism of Catholicism rather than centrifugal. In other words, if it's a spin-off, rather than something that over time, leads to the kind of Catholic unity or appreciation of the full charism of Catholicism, where are we going with this? And so I see is what's happening there. I understand your bishop's reluctance. Now, he may be reluctant on it because it's just funny and it's not unity. It's these funny Protestants and whatever you want to say. But if in fact we're going to recognize the religious charism, then the real religious charism must not be what drives them away from where they were, but must be what attracts them to where they want to go.
Now,
I'm not sure that maybe I'm asking for too much purity, if you will, but I think there's a caution there.
And so I can answer you this way from a dear friend of mine who is transitioning. He's lifetime Catholic, but he's going to become a full member of this new church. Is that he's not talking about Joshua Johnson, the new priest, but he's talking about some of the members of the congregation who were attracted. So with what was going on in the Episcopal Church in the South was a very, very divisive situation, very divisive. And I have a dear friend who, in fact, made a decision 7 or 8 years ago. She said, I need to find a new home. And so she went through a lot of prayer and evaluation and said, I think my new home is the Catholic Church. And so I have understood that there are a couple of families who are part of this new community who went through that same kind of searching.
Right.
Yeah. And so I don't want you to think that all of them are being driven out for reasons. I think that once they started looking into Catholicism, they were very attracted by the doctrines. That's my hope.
It seems to me that what's happening there is that church is not going to be part of your diocese.
No,
it's going to be belong to a separate diocese, which is this Chair of St. Peter. And in a certain sense, it's going to be like a Byzantine church, to use that kind of equality. It's like a Byzantine church that's down the road from the Roman Catholic Church. And that's quite interesting, that they're going to be sprinkled all around with this other sort of thing. And you're saying it's what, 15 minutes down the road or 5 minutes down the road?
It's five from my house and about 10 minutes from Bob, you used a term, and so this is maybe nomenclature I'm not familiar. Aren't they part of the Roman Catholic Church, though?
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's Eastern Byzantine rites too.
Right.
There's a new way of spelling Roman, Roamin.
Yes. Yes.
Roman.
Yeah.
Forgot the apostrophe.
Tim, can I jump in with a question? You used the term doctrine, and I'm wondering, is it not a combination of doctrine and liturgy that has become attractive for these people? Or maybe there's another factor too. What's your take on that?
I don't know. I don't know that. I know that my friend, who is Roman Catholic and who is going to join this community. No, he's attracted to the liturgy. I mean, he really likes the high church. Yeah. I wasn't. I'm not going to do it because I don't like. I guess I don't like the music. I mean, I know I don't like the music. I'd rather have Gregorian chant any day of my life and so we're not going to move down the road. We're going to stay where we are.
Right.
But I think, Bob, the idea that it will be like having a Ukrainian Catholic church down the road or something, that kind of thing.
On the other hand, Tim, it's identified. I mean, it has a Roman Catholic bishop. It's an ordinariate that has been established by Rome. It transcends diocesan boundaries. If there's a problem, as you described, the bishop reluctantly. All that said, I'm pretty sure it's Catholic and even Roman Catholic, whether that's Roamin with an apostrophe or not. But I come at it a little bit differently from the perspective of the echoing in this conversation in my head is the refrain from the prayer. Listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Mm-hmm. Listen, observe, listen. I love the sign on the little Benedictine monastery in the Berkeley Hills where I worship during the week. And it's from the it's from the
Whoops.
directive, the little catechism of Saint Benedict, and it says, listen with the ear of the heart. As you enter here, listen with the ear of the heart. And it's hard to do, but I try to do that. And I'm wondering, is this part of how the Spirit is trying to get our attention around just one more issue that's out there, and that is that the whole issue of my tongue-in-cheek saying, of course, his wife went into the convent and the kids are in an orphanage. So, Catholic priests, married Catholic priests. Well, yeah, it's the way it was in the first 1,000 years of church experience and had existed long. And if the Times say that makes sense one more time, why not do it again? Why not have this?
Yeah, and is this perhaps a kind of a backdoor way to mainstreaming that practice?
Right. Right. And do you think it's an accident that Lopes, as the bishop, from insider information from a personal conversation I had with a bishop who knew my background, in conversation with him, he says, you do know that Stephen Lopes' father was a Catholic priest?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yes, I was going to say that earlier. Steve Lopes' father was a priest, and I think his mother was a nun.
And his father, once he exited the canonical priesthood, continued his ministry as an eminent professor in a major university. And so, but you think that it's no one, that wasn't part of the public announcement or anything else, because it's really not very well known. But I don't think that that's an accident either. It's part of me is saying, could Rome have been so smart to have done that and knowing that intentionally? And I'm saying, no, I think I'm giving him too much credit. I think above and beyond, I think this is God's Spirit once again acting. He knows what it's like to be the son of a married priest. And
are there married men who have transitioned from Episcopal or Anglican into the normal straight run-of-the-mill Catholic Church, or are they only in the ordinary?
No.
Oh, there was one, I don't know if he's still there or not, from Newton, Massachusetts, who relocated and became a priest in a parish in Camarillo, California.
I think that
there's also my
backyard
cousin.
there.
yeah, they used to do that in the old days, Frank.
I think that's in some ways, I think that's a separate question than the one that troubles me. Because, for example, the Byzantine and Ukrainian rites
Moby, just say hi.
Ancient customs in which the Christianity was embedded. This is a kind of an organizational thing in which people dissatisfied in one place are now moving to the other place. And I also wonder why, 10 or 15, within the past 10 years, the Episcopal Church in the United States used to be known formally as the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States.
Yeah.
And within the 10 years, they dropped the word Protestant. So it seems there's a lot of streams going on in this thing that I think really complicated. And I don't think the most germane element here is that the priests are married.
No.
There's something else going on that it may be the drive of grace or whatever, but I have a certain and it's not anti-ecumenical. It's not that I'm denying the charism, the good, the decent Christian charism that you might find in the Methodist Church or the Episcopal Church. It's just that I'm not. It's too, in a way, at this point in time, it seems to me a little bit too complicated.
You know,
I have
Fred,
a,
I
I have a
really think that
cousin-
synodality is designed by the Holy Spirit to be the forum in which all of this is brought to the fore.
Yeah,
Sure.
could be. Good point.
I have a
Well-
cousin.
Well put, well
Your
stated.
norm.
I have a cousin in Nebraska who's a priest in Nebraska, and he was changing parishes, and the person who took his place was a married priest with his family, and people accepted them and loved them. It was just kind of really interesting. People have no problem with it.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is a lot of fellows that have been pastors in one tradition or another that wanted to become Catholic, and they become Roman Catholic. And so, you know, I think then they can become the pastor of a Roman Catholic church. But the chair of St. Peter, that's a different rite in a
Yes.
certain sense. It's Catholic, but it's not Roman Catholic. And they're calling it the Church of St. Peter Catholic. And so I think they can be married men, and they have to go to, you know, if they were Episcopalian or Methodist or whatever, they have to undergo training to become Catholic, or they can become a Catholic priest that is Roman. So I think it's, but what's happening, I think, is there are distinct parishes are of a distinct heritage, sticking in a certain sense with that. Whatever, it sounds to me like it's mostly Episcopalian, you know,
Yeah.
tradition that's, but I think it's also important for us to see, at least as I understand, it's not just in the United States. I think that bishop that you're talking about, he's got US and Canada, and there's another bishop that is in I'm sure in Great Britain or in Europe, that there are other priests already in some tradition want to become Catholic, but they're having their own heritage. So there's a real distinction there, I think.
Right.
So I think what you kind of set it off, Tim, with this. It's another church that's just down the street, so to speak, but it's a church of a different rite. It's Catholic, and your church is Catholic, but it's a different rite.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
That seems to be the best way to
experience
look
might
at
be
it.
a little something like, you know, going to the chair of St. Peter Church or going to a Byzantine Rite Catholic church. You know, it's a
Bob,
different
that
rite.
does clarify it for me. Thank you.
Except that those churches, Byzantines, they have, it's more than just the worship thing. There's a whole cultural history that they bring with them, that has been blessed by Catholicism for centuries.
But still, for the most part, a part of that cultural history has been that they broke away from the Orthodox.
Right.
So
Right.
they actually, in their origins, several hundred years ago, had kind of a controversial, violent beginning, you know, with martyrs like, what's his name, Jehoshaphat.
Right.
But
they had the same language, the same culture, the same customs, etc., etc.
Right.
So,
and they're also
common
often hated by their Orthodox brethren.
Yeah. I don't hate anybody.
Does anybody remember how many quote uniate churches there are, of which the Byzantine tradition is one?
There's 23 rites, right, Tom?
Yes,
Within the
I've
church.
never-
23. I think it's
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
I'm not good at numbers.
There are even more wrongs.
Yeah. One of the things that
Say
you know,
say more, Fred, say more.
No, no, I'm just,
And
The
so Frank,
cemetery,
Frank, let me ask you this. Do you think that Benedict, what do you think his motivation may have been in establishing this rite?
I think his motivation was that he saw a Christian charism that had the potential to be fully embraced both by the incoming people and by the people who are already here, down the road, perhaps by the within a new home in the Catholic Church for these people, and that they brought a Christian charism. And I don't think he was particularly concerned about the cell. By the way, that, you know, my own experience is I'm still kind of a married priest. I'm not currently married, but I was. That's not a real problem for the Catholic laity.
Not at all.
Right.
Yeah, you're like myself, a widowed Catholic priest,
Right.
which I remember my spiritual director saying, "What is a widowed Catholic married priest?" You know, with regard to the priests swimming the Tiber, I remember back in the 80s, 90s, doing some consulting related to the work I was doing at the Center for Ministry here in Oakland for the Anglican Church of Canada, and one of the Anglican priests took me aside and basically said, you know those guys who are swimming the Tiber who are converting to Catholicism these days?" And there was a lot happening at the point. He says, "You're welcome to them. You can have them. Good riddance." Because these were the ones who were raising hell around the married, around the women Catholic priests. And that was the biggest issue, that the churches were seceding from the Anglican Church of Canada in quite a numbers. The conversation I was having was located in Vancouver, and there was one very well-to-do parish that it created all kinds of problems that eventually was decided by the government and the courts in Canada in favor of the diocese, and the diocese there in Western Canada was the Diocese of New Westminster, sort of.
well, there's also plenty of
you can have them.
there's also plenty of Roman priests who have swum the Thames.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I know of a number of them. Yeah, I remember also in one of these consultations I was doing with the equivalent of the cardinals, the 5 presiding archbishops this consultation had to do with psychological testing of seminarians and for the Church of Canada and stuff. And at dinner, one took me aside and basically said, you know, he was from Eastern Canada, and with my French name Charpentier, and he put it together, my connection with Quebec, and he said, you know, if you'd like to come and work in a diocese, I'll make it very easy for you. It would be very, very welcome. He said, I'd be happy to receive your ordination. We won't reordain you or anything, and you can work right here out of the office in Canada.
Wow.
It was a fascinating conversation.
I bet.
I was in the seminary this recent time. I was in the seminary. With a man who was a Anglican priest in Canada for 32 years. And then he told me he poped out. And we became friends. And his archbishop came, the Archbishop of St. John's, Newfoundland, came to visit. And the Archbishop and I became friendly. With the same age, and he was around for 2 or 3 days. We had a lot of chat. So then I went to Canada because he invited me to come for his ordination and to preach at his first mass. And I was in a reception, and the Archbishop and I were talking. And the Archbishop said to me, Frank, I'm not sure what I can do with this Anglican thing. It wasn't defined. All right. And I said, well, one thing you can do is, you're the Archbishop. call him in, sit down, and talk to him about it. He said, you think so? I said, yeah, just call him and sit down and talk to him about it. But I know exactly what the Archbishop meant. And so unfortunately, my friend died almost a year ago to the day, and we were very good friends.
Oh.
And so I'm I think there are all sorts of different reasons why people might join the Catholic Church. But we're almost automatic in saying that if you're not happy because your Anglican church or your Episcopal church is letting women become priests or bishops, etc., should we challenge that as a reason to become a Catholic?
Yes.
Well, let's at least talk about it.
Guys,
Okay.
I'm gonna have to go.
Challenge is strong, yeah.
May I, before we terminate, can I ask something of Tim? See if perhaps we are in agreement here. Could we suggest, Tim, that you sooner rather than later, invite Joshua out to lunch and just get to know him a little bit and talk with him, and then come back and share with us whatever you want. I would like to ask one thing. If you do that, be sure that you take a selfie with him.
A selfie for what reason?
Just so that we could see what the guy looks like.
Oh, I was going to invite him to come on one of our Friday things.
Why don't you get to know him first?
That might be,
Okay.
might be, yeah, that could be a tad overwhelming and, but you
Yeah,
could,
I'm looking.
first step, great idea, take him to lunch.
There are so
I
many.
will do that.
There are moments when we overwhelm each other, so.
Yeah.
But it's a loving overwhelming.
Yeah.
A loving overwhelming.
I would just say, is it any wonder that Sparky Schultz went beyond church? Just focused on spirituality.
Tom, I will do that.
Good.
I will do that.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
We will look
Yeah.
forward to it, to the results, whatever however the spirit may move.
Now, will you comp me for the lunch?
We could take up a collection if you really need it.
I will
Okay.
set up a GoFundMe account if you want.
All right, thank you.
We'll have Johnny get an extra meal and save it for you and mail it.
There it is.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. I will do that. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't start with a formal prayer. Should we finish with a formal prayer?
Sounds good.
Norm, you say it sounds good? Go for it.
Well, dear God, we thank you for these conversations that we're having, for the way that they challenge us and the ways in which they affirm us, and the ways in which they help us in our ministry to go to a deeper understanding of what we're about as priests in the country, and help us to continue to use these conversations to grow in our own knowledge and our own ability to serve others. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you.
You guys have a good weekend.
God bless
Bye.
you all.
Thank you,
You have a
everybody.
good weekend. Well,
Good
St.
weekend, good
Patrick's
week.
Day-